Long before sacred texts were written on parchment, before ink preserved theology in libraries and temples, humanity was already asking the oldest question of all: where do we come from? Across deserts, forests, rivers, and savannas, long before the book of Genesis was compiled in the Near East, African civilizations were telling stories about the birth of the universe, the origin of humanity, and the mysterious power that brought existence out of nothingness. These stories were not written in books, yet they survived for thousands of years, carried in memory, spoken through ritual, sung beside fires, and guarded by generations who believed that forgetting creation meant forgetting who they were. When modern audiences hear the word Genesis, many immediately think of the Bible, a structured narrative beginning with darkness, divine speech, and the creation of the world in ordered stages. But what if similar ideas existed long before? What if entire civilizations possessed their own accounts of creation, preserved not through scripture, but through living voices? Africa, often called the cradle of humanity by scientists, was also a cradle of spiritual imagination. Here, creation was not a distant theological theory. It was a living reality woven into daily life, agriculture, community laws, and the relationship between humans and the unseen world. In traditional African societies, knowledge did not depend on writing to survive. Instead, memory itself was sacred. Elders served as living libraries and storytellers, known in many regions as griots, were entrusted with preserving history, genealogy, morality, and cosmology. These storytellers did not merely entertain. They transmitted truths believed to come from the ancestors and, ultimately, from the Creator. Every retelling of a creation story was an act of renewal, a reminder that the universe was not random but intentional. Unlike later religious traditions that gathered belief into a single canonical text, Africa preserved many creation narratives simultaneously. Each people, each landscape, each language expressed the mystery of beginnings in its own way. Yet beneath this diversity lies a remarkable unity. Across West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, and the southern regions of the continent, recurring themes appear again and again. A supreme creator existing before all things, a world emerging from darkness or water, humanity shaped from earth itself, and a time when humans lived in closeness with the divine. These stories were not considered myths in the modern sense of fiction. To those who told them, they were memory, sacred explanations passed down from the first ancestors. The boundary between history and spirituality did not exist as it does today. Creation was not something that happened only once in the distant past. It was an ongoing process. The sun rising each morning echoed the first dawn. Birth mirrored the original act of creation. Rituals reenacted the moment when order first overcame chaos. Western scholarship for many centuries overlooked these traditions, assuming that civilizations without written scriptures lacked complex theology. Yet anthropologists, historians, and linguists who listened carefully began to discover something astonishing. African cosmologies were deeply philosophical, often containing sophisticated reflections on existence, morality, and the structure of the universe. Some traditions described creation beginning in silence and darkness. Others spoke of a divine word or thought bringing reality into form. Still others imagined creation unfolding gradually through stages of separation and organization, ideas strikingly familiar to readers of Genesis. But the African understanding of creation carried a distinctive perspective. The universe was not created merely for human dominion. It was a balanced community of visible and invisible beings. Mountains, rivers, animals, and ancestors all participated in existence as part of a sacred network. Humanity's role was not simply to rule, but to maintain harmony. Creation, therefore, was not only an origin story, but also a moral instruction, a guide for living rightly within the cosmos. Because these teachings were transmitted orally, They adapted subtly over generations while preserving their core truths. A storyteller might emphasize different details depending on the audience or the needs of the community, yet the foundation remained unchanged. There was a beginning, there was intention, and there was a creator beyond human understanding. The absence of a single written African Genesis does not mean such a vision never existed. Rather, it existed everywhere at once, spoken in hundreds of languages, remembered through countless voices. Imagine a night thousands of years ago. A fire burns at the center of a village. Children sit close to elders as stars fill the sky, stars that themselves become part of the story. The elder begins not with certainty, but with mystery, before the earth, before people, before animals. There was only darkness, or water, or endless sky. With each word, the listeners are transported back to the moment before existence itself. In that moment, storytelling becomes sacred time travel, reconnecting the present generation with the beginning of all things. These narratives did more than explain how the world began. They shaped identity. To know the creation story of one's people was to know one's place in the universe. It explained why death exists, why humans suffer, why nature must be respected, and why ancestors remain spiritually present. Creation stories formed the foundation of law, ethics, and community responsibility. They answered not only how humans came into existence, but how humans should live. As trade routes expanded and later religions spread across Africa, including Christianity and Islam, many traditional creation narratives blended, adapted, or survived quietly beneath new theological frameworks. Yet echoes of ancient cosmologies remained. Even today, in ceremonies, proverbs, and rituals, fragments of these primordial stories continue to speak. They remind us that Africa's spiritual heritage did not begin with imported scriptures. It possessed its own profound reflections on creation long before outside text arrived. Understanding this ancient memory requires changing how we think about history itself. Written records are only one way civilizations remember. Oral tradition, when carefully preserved, can carry ideas across centuries with remarkable resilience. In Africa, creation was not locked inside a book. It lived in voices, movements, songs, and sacred spaces. Every generation became both student and guardian of the beginning. So when we ask whether there was a Genesis before the Bible, the answer may not lie in discovering a lost manuscript hidden beneath desert sands. Instead, it lies in listening to traditions that have survived without paper, to philosophies encoded in story, and to cultures that understood creation not as a single narrative owned by one people, but as humanity's shared attempt to understand existence itself. Before chapters and verses, before written law and organized theology, Africa was already telling the story of the beginning. And as we step deeper into these traditions, we begin to see that the question is not whether Africa had a book of creation, but whether the world has forgotten how many voices once told the same sacred story in different tongues. In the beginning of many African creation traditions, before the earth had shape and before humanity took its first breath, there existed a presence beyond form, beyond time, and beyond human comprehension, a supreme creator. Across the vastness of the African continent, among peoples separated by thousands of kilometers and countless languages, one idea appears again and again with remarkable consistency. Above all spirits, ancestors, and natural forces stands a single ultimate source of existence. This creator was not born, was not created, and did not struggle for power. The creator simply was, existing before the beginning itself. Among the Akan people of West Africa, this supreme being is known as Nyam, the sky god whose existence fills the heavens. To the Yoruba, the creator is Olajimere, the owner of destiny and the source of all life. Among the Tswana, Matamo stands as the one who brought order into existence, while the Dogon people speak of Alma, the cosmic intelligence who shaped the universe according to sacred design. Though the names differ, the essence remains strikingly similar, an all-powerful origin beyond the visible world, responsible for the creation and sustaining of everything that exists. Unlike later religious systems that often portray God as constantly intervening in human affairs, many African traditions describe the supreme creator as both deeply present and mysteriously distant. The creator initiated existence, but did not always remain directly involved in daily human matters. Instead, spiritual intermediaries, lesser divinities, nature spirits, or ancestors acted as bridges between humanity and the divine source. This distance was not a sign of absence, but of greatness. The Creator was considered too vast, too sacred, too powerful to be approached casually. Just as the sun gives life yet cannot be touched, the Supreme Being existed beyond ordinary human reach. African cosmologies frequently begin with a state of primordial chaos or emptiness. Some traditions describe endless darkness stretching across existence, while others speak of an infinite ocean or a silent void without form or movement. In this stillness, the Creator alone possessed awareness. Creation began not through conflict, but through intention, through thought, word, or divine will. The universe emerged because the Creator desired it to exist. In several traditions, creation unfolds through speech. The Creator speaks, and reality responds. Light appears, space expands, and order gradually replaces chaos. This idea of creative speech reveals a profound philosophical insight. Words themselves carry power. Language becomes more than communication. It becomes an instrument of creation. Long before written scriptures describe divine commands bringing forth light, African storytellers were already describing a cosmos shaped by sacred utterance, a universe born from sound and intention. The first act of creation was often the establishment of order. Sky was separated from earth, above distinguished from below, light divided from darkness. These separations were essential because harmony required structure. Without boundaries, existence remained formless. The Creator organized reality step by step, transforming potential into living substance. Mountains rose, waters gathered, winds began to move, and time itself started to flow. Creation was not random. It followed purpose and design. Yet African traditions rarely describe the Creator as working alone in a simple mechanical process. Instead, creation often involved delegation. The Supreme Being entrusted aspects of formation to spiritual agents, divine messengers, primordial beings, or cosmic craftsmen. Among the Yoruba, for example, divine figures participate in shaping the earth under the authority of Olodumare. In Dogon cosmology, cosmic order unfolds through complex stages guided by sacred intelligence. These narratives emphasize hierarchy without diminishing unity. All creative power ultimately flows from one source. This concept challenges a common misconception that traditional African religions were purely polytheistic. While many spiritual beings exist, they are not equal to the Supreme Creator. Rather, they function within a structured cosmos governed by a single ultimate origin. The Creator remains supreme, eternal, and unmatched, a theological vision surprisingly close to monotheistic ideas later formalized in written religions. Another striking feature of African creation thought is the moral character attributed to the Creator. The Supreme Being is not merely powerful, but wise and just. Creation itself reflects balance, day and night, male and female, life and rest, growth and decay. These opposites were not contradictions, but complementary forces designed to sustain harmony. The world was created good because it reflected the intention of a wise Creator. In many stories, humanity was not the first creation, but the culmination of preparation. The earth had to be shaped, waters settled, and the environment made ready before humans could exist. This sequence suggests a deep awareness of interconnectedness. The human life depends upon a carefully ordered world. Long before ecological science, these traditions express the understanding that humans are part of a larger system established by divine wisdom. Yet perhaps the most profound element shared across African cosmologies is the idea that the Creator infused creation with spirit. Life was not merely physical matter assembled into form. It carried an invisible essence linking all beings back to their source. The same sacred energy that animated humans also flowed through animals, rivers, forests, and the land itself. Existence was alive because it remained connected to the Creator's original act. This worldview shaped how communities understood reverence. Worship was less about fear and more about alignment, living in harmony with the order established at creation. Rituals honored the Creator indirectly through respect for ancestors, nature, and community laws believed to originate from divine wisdom. To disrupt harmony was not only a social error, but a cosmic imbalance. When modern readers compare these traditions with the biblical Genesis, the similarities can feel astonishing. A supreme creator before all things. Creation emerging from darkness, order formed through divine command, and a world intentionally prepared for humanity. Yet African traditions developed independently within their own cultural and historical contexts. Rather than copying a single narrative, they reveal a shared human intuition that existence has meaning, that order comes from intelligence, and that the universe began with purpose. For generations, these beliefs were preserved without temples of stone or written doctrine. They survived because communities live them daily. Farmers planting seeds, elders teaching children, and ritual leaders invoking blessings all reaffirmed the same truth. Life originates from a sacred source greater than humanity itself. As we continue deeper into Africa's ancient vision of creation, the image becomes clearer. Before humans walked the earth, before animals roamed the plains, before even the sky stretched above the land, there was a creator whose will awakened existence. The universe was not an accident, but an expression, a deliberate unfolding from unity into diversity. And within that unfolding, humanity would soon take its place, formed from the very substance of the world the Creator had brought into being. After the Supreme Creator brought order out of the original emptiness. African creation traditions begin to describe a universe taking visible shape, a world emerging layer by layer, as if reality itself were slowly awakening. The sky rose above, the earth settled below, waters found their boundaries, and life prepared to enter existence. Across countless African cultures, this moment is remembered not as a sudden mechanical event, but as a sacred unfolding, a gradual transformation guided by divine intention. Creation was alive, dynamic, and meaningful, and every element of the world carried a spiritual origin. In many stories, the first great act following creation was the separation of heaven and earth. At the beginning, the sky and the land were said to be close together, almost touching, allowing direct communication between the divine and human realms. The universe existed in intimacy. Distance had not yet entered creation. Among several West African traditions, people believed that heaven once rested just above the earth, so near that humans could reach it. This closeness symbolized harmony, a time when humanity lived under the immediate presence of the Creator, without barriers or separation. As the world took form, the Creator often entrusted spiritual beings or divine helpers with shaping the physical environment. In Yoruba cosmology, sacred emissaries descended from the heavens carrying soil, seeds, and creative power to form dry land upon the waters. Among other traditions, cosmic beings molded mountains, carved rivers, and planted forests according to divine design. These stories emphasize that the earth was not random terrain, but carefully prepared space, made suitable for life long before humans appeared. Water holds a special role in many African creation narratives. Sometimes the world begins as an endless ocean, symbolizing both chaos and potential. From these waters, land emerges, an image reflecting both physical observation and spiritual symbolism. Water represents the unknown, while earth represents stability and life. The transition from water to land marks the moment when existence becomes inhabitable, when creation moves from possibility to reality. Animals frequently appear before humans in these stories, not as inferior creatures, but as companions within creation. Many traditions describe animals receiving life alongside or even before humanity, each given specific roles within the cosmic balance. Animals were teachers, messengers, and sometimes participants in shaping the world. Their presence reminds listeners that humanity was never meant to stand alone at the center of existence, but to live within a community of living, beings connected by spirit. Then comes the most sacred moment in many African cosmologies, the creation of the first humans. Across regions separated by vast distances, one powerful image repeats: humanity formed from Earth itself. The Creator, or divine agents acting under divine authority, shaped human beings from clay, soil, or dust taken from the ground. This symbolism expresses a profound philosophical idea. Humans belong to the earth because they are made from it. The land is not merely a resource, but a relative, a source of identity and life. Among certain traditions, the Creator molds human figures carefully, as an artist shapes sculpture, giving attention to detail and intention to form. Yet the figures remain lifeless until a final act occurs, the giving of breath or spirit. The Creator breathes into humanity or places within them a life force that transforms clay into living beings. With breath comes consciousness, emotion, and connection to the spiritual world. Humanity becomes both physical and spiritual, standing at the intersection between earth and heaven. This moment establishes a defining feature of African spiritual thought. Humans carry within them a divine spark. Life is sacred because it originates directly from the Creator's power. Every person therefore possesses inherent dignity, not granted by society, but embedded in creation itself. To harm another human is, in a sense, to disrespect the sacred act that brought humanity into existence. Early humanity, according to many traditions, lived in harmony with creation. There was no sharp division between the physical and spiritual worlds. Humans communicated freely with divine beings, understood the language of nature, and lived without fear of death or alienation. Work was not punishment, but participation in sustaining balance. The earth provided abundantly because humans respected the order established at the beginning. Nature itself was seen as alive with spirit. Trees, rivers, stones, and winds were not inert objects, but expressions of creative energy. This worldview fostered deep respect for the environment. Hunting, farming, and settlement were often accompanied by rituals acknowledging the spiritual dimension of the land. Humanity's role was not domination, but stewardship, maintaining harmony between visible and invisible realms. In several African narratives, the first humans were also the first ancestors. They became the bridge between future generations and the Creator. When they eventually passed from the physical world, they did not disappear, but entered the spiritual realm, continuing to guide the living. Thus, ancestry itself traces back to the original act of creation, linking every generation to the beginning of existence. What stands out in these traditions is the absence of isolation. Humans were never portrayed as abandoned creations struggling alone in an indifferent universe. Instead, they existed within a network of relationships with the Creator, with spirits, with animals, with nature, and with one another. Identity was communal rather than individual, rooted in shared origin. The world at this stage of creation resembled a sacred garden, a place of balance where humanity understood its purpose. There was closeness between heaven and earth, trust between humans and the divine, and unity among all forms of life. Many scholars have noted how this harmony echoes the idea of Eden found in later biblical tradition. Yet within African cosmology, it emerges naturally from indigenous understanding rather than written doctrine. It reflects a universal human longing to imagine a time when existence was whole and unbroken. But harmony in these stories is never static. Creation is alive, and living systems can change. The closeness between humans and the divine would not last forever. Somewhere within the unfolding story of humanity, a disruption would occur, an action, misunderstanding, or imbalance that altered the relationship between heaven and earth. The world that began in unity would experience separation, and the distance between humans and the Creator would grow. As the first humans walked upon the newly formed earth, carrying the breath of the Creator within them, they stood at the height of cosmic harmony. They were children of both soil and spirit, guardians of a balanced world. Yet the very freedom that allowed humanity to live consciously also carried risk. And soon, according to the ancient memories preserved across Africa, something would change, an event that would explain why the sky no longer rests close to the earth, why death entered human experience, and why humanity began searching once again for the Creator who once felt so near. In the ancient memories preserved across African creation traditions, the world did not remain forever in its original harmony. The closeness between heaven and earth, once natural and unquestioned, gradually faded, replaced by distance, struggle, and mortality. Just as many cultures around the world tell stories of a lost golden age, African cosmologies also speak of a turning point, a moment when something went wrong between humanity and the divine order. This was not always described as a single dramatic fall, but rather as a profound disruption, an event that changed the relationship between humans, the Creator, and the universe itself. In the earliest time, people lived with direct access to the sacred. The Creator was near, the sky hung low above the earth, and communication between realms required no ritual or intermediary. Humans understood their place within creation and lived according to the balance established at the beginning. Yet many traditions explain that this harmony depended on responsibility. Freedom was given to humanity, but it came with expectations, respect for nature, obedience to sacred laws, and humility before the divine. One of the most widespread African motifs describes the sky once resting close to the earth until human behavior forced it to withdraw. Among several West African traditions, stories tell of people pounding grain, cooking, or working carelessly, allowing smoke, noise, or tools to strike the heavens above them. Day after day, small acts of disrespect accumulated. The sky, once patient, finally moved farther away, separating the divine realm from human life. What may sound simple carries deep symbolism. Separation did not occur because the Creator abandoned humanity, but because human actions disrupted harmony. Other traditions tell of disobedience, not necessarily rebellion born from evil, but misunderstanding or impatience. In some stories, humans were given instructions meant to preserve eternal life, yet they failed to follow them correctly. A messenger sent by the Creator carried a promise of immortality, but through delay, distraction, or error, the message was lost or altered. As a result, death entered the human world. These narratives reflect a powerful philosophical insight. Mortality is not merely punishment, but the consequence of broken communication between humanity and the divine. Unlike later theological concepts that emphasize guilt or sin as inherent human corruption, African traditions often portray the separation as tragic rather than condemnatory. Humans were not evil. They were imperfect, learning beings capable of mistakes. The breaking of harmony becomes a lesson about responsibility and awareness. The universe remained sacred, but humanity now had to work to restore balance, rather than live effortlessly within it. In many stories, the Creator responds not with anger, but with withdrawal. The divine presence becomes distant, no longer immediately accessible. Spiritual intermediaries, ancestors, spirits, and ritual specialists emerge as necessary bridges between worlds. Prayer, sacrifice, and ceremony develop as ways to reconnect with the sacred order that once existed naturally. Religion, in this sense, is born from separation. Humanity's attempt to remember and restore its lost closeness with the Creator. Death, suffering, and hardship begin to appear in these narratives as part of the altered human condition. Where once life flowed without interruption, now humans must struggle, labor, and face uncertainty. Agriculture requires effort. Illness becomes possible. Relationships require moral guidance. Yet these difficulties are not meaningless. They serve as reminders of the fragile balance between human action and cosmic order. Some traditions describe the introduction of death through symbolic stories involving animals. A slow messenger carrying news of eternal life fails to arrive before a faster creature delivers the message of mortality. Others speak of humans choosing immediate gratification over divine instruction, unknowingly shaping their destiny. These stories emphasize chance, choice, and consequence, reflecting a worldview that sees life as shaped by both human decisions and cosmic timing. The growing distance between heaven and earth also explains why spiritual knowledge becomes sacred and guarded. Elders, diviners, and ritual leaders assume new roles as interpreters of the unseen world. Dreams, visions, and ancestral communication become pathways through which fragments of the original harmony can still be experienced. Though separation occurred, connection was never completely lost. The Creator remained present through spirit, nature, and memory. Importantly, African cosmologies rarely end this phase with despair. The world after separation is not cursed beyond hope. Instead, it becomes a place of moral responsibility. Humans are called to live wisely, respect community, honor ancestors, and maintain balance with nature. Harmony is no longer automatic. It must be cultivated. Every ethical action becomes a small act of restoration, a way of moving closer again to the divine order established at creation. This understanding transforms the meaning of suffering. Hardship is not proof that creation failed, but evidence that humanity lives in a changed relationship with the sacred. Life becomes a journey of remembrance, remembering how the world once was and striving to live in a way that honors that original harmony. Rituals reenact creation, festivals celebrate renewal, and storytelling keeps alive the memory of the time when heaven and earth were united. When compared with the biblical story of Eden, the parallels are striking yet distinct. Both traditions describe an original closeness between humanity and the divine, followed by separation. Yet African narratives often focus less on punishment and more on imbalance. The idea that harmony depends on mutual respect between humans and the cosmos. The loss of closeness is not simply a moral failure, but a cosmic shift explaining why humans must now seek the sacred rather than live constantly within it. Through these stories, ancient African societies explored universal questions. Why does death exist? Why is God distant? Why must humans struggle despite being created with purpose? The answers were preserved not as rigid doctrine, but as living wisdom passed from generation to generation. Each retelling reminded listeners that their actions mattered, that the universe responded to human behavior, and that harmony could still be pursued even after it had been broken. And so the world moved into a new era, an age in which humans walked the earth aware of both loss and possibility. The Creator remained the source of life, but the path back to divine closeness now required memory, ritual, and moral living. The sky stood high above, no longer within reach, yet its distance inspired humanity's deepest spiritual longing. From that longing emerged prayer, tradition, and the enduring search for meaning, a search that continues wherever human beings look upward and wonder how the harmony of the beginning might one day be felt again. Although these ancient stories speak of beginnings long beyond recorded history, they're not relics trapped in the past. African creation traditions continue to live, breathe, and shape the way millions of people understand existence, identity, and humanity's place in the universe. Unlike written scriptures that remain fixed on a page, these narratives survive because they are practiced, carried through rituals, proverbs, songs, ceremonies, and daily ways of living that still reflect the original vision of creation as a sacred and ongoing reality. In African thought, creation was never understood as a single completed event. The universe did not simply begin and then stop evolving. It continues to unfold through human actions, natural cycles, and spiritual relationships. Every birth echoes the first creation. Every harvest reenacts the Creator's gift of life. Every moral decision either restores or disrupts the balance established at the beginning of time. Creation, therefore, is not only about origins but about responsibility. Humanity participates in sustaining the world, acting as caretakers of harmony rather than passive inhabitants of a finished universe. This perspective offers a profound philosophical contrast to modern views that often separate humanity from nature. In many African traditions, the earth is not an object to be exploited, but a living relative sharing the same spiritual source as human beings. Rivers are respected as life givers, forests as sacred spaces, and animals as fellow participants in existence. Such beliefs formed ethical systems long before environmental science began warning of ecological imbalance. The ancient stories taught that when humans forget their connection to creation, disorder follows, a lesson that resonates powerfully in a world now facing environmental crisis. Equally important is the role of community embedded within African creation narratives. Humanity was never created as isolated individuals, but as interconnected beings whose survival depends upon cooperation. The first humans were ancestors, and ancestors remain present, guiding and protecting future generations. This understanding reshapes the concept of time itself. The past is not gone. It lives alongside the present. The future is shaped by honoring those who came before. Creation becomes a continuous circle linking the living, the dead, and the unborn within one shared existence. For centuries, colonial narratives dismissed African cosmologies as simple myths or folklore, failing to recognize their intellectual depth and philosophical sophistication. Yet closer study reveals systems of thought grappling with the same universal questions explored by the world's major religions and philosophies. What is the origin of life? Why does suffering exist? What is humanity's purpose? African creation traditions answered these questions through symbolic storytelling rather than written doctrine, demonstrating that wisdom does not depend on literacy alone. Knowledge can survive in memory, performance, and collective experience. Today, scholars, artists, and spiritual seekers are rediscovering these traditions not merely as cultural artifacts, but as sources of insight relevant to modern life. In a rapidly changing world marked by technological advancement and social fragmentation, the African vision of interconnectedness offers an alternative understanding of progress, one that values balance over domination, relationship over isolation, and reverence over control. The stories remind us that humanity's greatest strength lies not in conquering nature, but in understanding its sacred rhythms. These creation narratives also challenge the assumption that spiritual truth belongs to a single civilization or text. When we compare African cosmologies with later written traditions, similarities emerge not as evidence of imitation, but as reflections of shared human curiosity. Across continents and cultures, people have looked at the sky, observed the cycles of life and death, and asked the same questions about beginnings. The African Genesis stands as one voice among many in humanity's collective attempt to understand existence, a voice that developed independently, shaped by landscapes, languages, and ancestral memory. Perhaps the greatest lesson of these traditions is humility. They remind us that no single story can fully contain the mystery of creation. Each culture preserves a fragment of understanding, a perspective shaped by experience and environment. The diversity of creation stories does not weaken their meaning, it enriches it. Together, they reveal that humanity has always sensed a deeper order behind existence, even when expressed in different symbols and narratives. In many African communities today, elders still begin stories with phrases that place listeners outside ordinary time, inviting them to step back into the beginning. Children learn that the world is sacred not because of distant theology, but because they themselves are part of an ongoing creation. Festivals celebrate renewal, rituals honor ancestors, and communal life reflects the belief that harmony must be actively maintained. These practices keep alive the memory of the time when heaven and earth were close, and the hope that connection with the sacred can still be renewed. As we reflect on these ancient teachings, the idea of the African Book of Creation becomes clearer. It is not a single physical text hidden somewhere in history. It is a vast living archive written in stories, landscapes, and human memory. Its pages are spoken rather than printed, remembered rather than stored. Each storyteller becomes a guardian of Genesis, each generation a new chapter in the unfolding story of creation. And perhaps this realization brings us back to the question that began our journey. Was there a Genesis before the Bible? The answer may be more profound than expected. Humanity has always carried Genesis within itself, in the urge to explain existence, in the reverence felt beneath the night sky, and in the stories passed from elders to children across countless generations. Africa's creation traditions reveal that long before written scripture organized belief into chapters and verses, people were already searching for meaning, already recognizing a creator, already telling stories about the birth of the world. These stories endure because the search for beginnings never truly ends. Every generation asks again where life came from and what purpose it holds. And as long as humans continue to wonder, to tell stories, and to seek harmony with the world around them, the ancient African Genesis will remain alive, not as a forgotten past, but as a living reminder that creation is not only something that happened long ago, but something still unfolding within us today.